Imagine a quiet little town where everyone knows your name, where the streets are lined with cozy houses and the air smells faintly of pine trees. A place called Willow Creek. Sounds perfect, right? But what if I told you that, in this sleepy corner of the world, a 10-year-old girl was about to unravel a secret so dark, so twisted, that it would leave an entire courtroom speechless? Welcome to today's episode of our True Crime podcast, where we dig into the cases that shock, inspire, and stick with you long after the story ends. This isn't just another tale of crime and punishment. This is about a little girl named Sophie, a child who lived a life no one could have imagined, under the roof of a woman everyone adored, Clara Hensley. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be asking yourself, how well do we really know the people we call heroes? Willow Creek wasn't the kind of place you'd expect drama to unfold. Nestled between rolling hills and a lazy river, it was the sort of town where folks waved from porches and left their doors unlocked. Kids rode bikes until dusk, and the biggest scandal was usually who forgot to bring pie to the annual fair. But beneath that postcard-perfect surface, something was brewing, something no one saw coming. At the heart of it all was Clara Hensley. To the people of Willow Creek, she was a saint, always dressed in crisp blouses and a warm smile. She'd spend her days organizing fundraisers for the local children's charity. Need blankets for the homeless? Clara was there. Toys for underprivileged kids at Christmas? Clara had it covered. She was the kind of woman who'd stop to chat with you at the grocery store, asking about your day like she really cared. And everyone thought she did. Then there was Sophie, her daughter, or so they thought. A quiet little girl with big, curious eyes and a mop of brown hair that always seemed a little tangled. She'd trail behind Clara at community events, holding her hand, smiling shyly when people said how lucky she was to have such a wonderful mom. The perfect duo, right? A mother and daughter straight out of a feel-good movie. But appearances can lie. And in this case, they lied bigger than anyone could have guessed. What nobody knew, what nobody even suspected, was that behind closed doors, Sophie's life was a nightmare. The kind of nightmare that doesn't leave scars you can see right away, but the kind that sinks deep into your bones. Clara wasn't just strict. She wasn't just demanding. There was something darker at play. Something Sophie learned to hide from the world. Bruises under long sleeves. A flinch when someone raised their voice. A silence that wasn't just shyness. And here's where it gets wild. This story isn't just about what Clara did to Sophie. It's about what Sophie did to Clara. Because one day, in a courtroom packed with wide-eyed townsfolk, that little girl stood up and spoke. She didn't just whisper a secret. She dropped a bombshell that turned everything upside down. A bombshell about lies, about money, about a past Clara thought she'd buried forever. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind a bit. Picture this. A sunny afternoon in Willow Creek. Sophie's at school, doodling in her notebook, while the other kids chatter about recess. Clara's across town, shaking hands at a charity meeting, her laugh echoing through the room. Everything seems normal, peaceful even, but peace doesn't last forever, not when there's a box of secrets waiting to be found, tucked away in a dusty attic. See, Sophie wasn't the kind of kid who made waves. She kept her head down, stayed out of trouble, but she was smart, smarter than anyone gave her credit for. And curious, too. The kind of curious that makes you poke around in places you're not supposed to. Like that attic. Like that box. A box that held papers, old checks, and something else. Something that would change her life forever. Now, I know what you're thinking. A kid finding a box doesn't sound like much. But trust me, this wasn't just any box. This was the key to a Pandora's mess of lies Clara had built her whole life around. Lies about who she was, lies about where her money came from, and the biggest lie of all, lies about Sophie. By now, you're probably hooked. How does a 10-year-old go from being a quiet kid in a small town to the center of a courtroom drama? What did she say that made everyone gasp? And what was in that box that flipped Willow Creek upside down? Stick around, because this story's just getting started. We've got twists you won't see coming, secrets that'll make your jaw drop. And a little girl who proved courage isn't about size, it's about heart. So grab your headphones, settle in, and let's peel back the layers of this mystery together. Because in Willow Creek, nothing was what it seemed, and Sophie was about to prove it. Let's step back into Willow Creek for a moment. Picture it in your mind, a sleepy little town where the sun filters through the trees, casting golden patches on the sidewalks. The kind of place where you can hear birds chirping in the morning and the distant hum of a lawnmower on a lazy Saturday. It's peaceful, it's charming, and right in the middle of it all, you've got Clara Hensley and her little girl Sophie, living what looks like the perfect small-town life. From the outside, they were a postcard family. Clara was the star of Willow Creek, the woman everyone turned to when something needed doing. She'd breeze through the town square with her neatly pressed skirts and that dazzling smile, waving at neighbors like she was in some kind of parade. People couldn't get enough of her. At the annual bake sale, her lemon squares were the first to sell out. At the charity picnics, she'd be the one handing out balloons to kids, laughing as they tugged at the strings. Everyone said the same thing. Clara Hensley was a blessing to this town. And Sophie? She was the cherry on top of Clara's perfect image. A tiny figure with those wide hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. She'd tag along beside Clara, her small hand tucked into her mother's, her sneakers scuffing the pavement as they walked. At community events, folks would pat her head and say how sweet she was, how lucky she must feel to have a mom like Clara. She'd nod, flash a shy little smile, and that was that. To the world, they were a team, a mother and daughter who had it all together. But here's the thing about perfection, it's rarely real. And in Sophie's world, it was a lie so thick you could choke on it. Step inside their house on Maple Lane, close the door behind you, and the mask came off. That warm, glowing Clara everyone loved? She vanished the second the curtains were drawn. In her place was someone else, someone cold, someone sharp, someone who ruled that house like it was a prison. And Sophie was the inmate. It started small, the way these things often do. A harsh word here, a snap command there. Sophie learned early on that Clara didn't like messes spilled. Milk could set her off for hours. She'd stand over Sophie, her voice low and cutting, telling her how clumsy she was, how ungrateful. But it didn't stop at words. There were nights when Sophie would creep to her room, her arms stinging from where Clara had grabbed her too hard, leaving marks she'd have to hide. Bruises bloomed under her skin like ugly little flowers, always in places nobody would see under her sleeves, along her back. Clara had rules. So many rules. The dishes had to be stacked just so. The toys couldn't be left out. And if Sophie dared to cry, oh, that was the worst. Tears were weakness, Clara said. Tears meant she wasn't trying hard enough to be good. So Sophie stopped crying, at least where Clara could see. She'd bite her lip until it bled, swallow the sobs down, and wait until she was alone to let the hurt spill out. She got good at it, too good at pretending everything was fine. The physical stuff was bad enough, but the words cut deeper. Clara had a way of twisting things, making Sophie feel like she was the problem. "You're lucky I took you in," she'd hiss on the bad nights, her voice dripping with venom. "Nobody else would bother with a kid like you." Over time, Sophie started to believe it. Maybe she was lucky. Maybe this was what love looked like. Maybe the shouting, the grabbing, the constant fear that was just how families worked. She didn't know any different. But Sophie wasn't invisible. Not completely. There were people who saw her, even if they didn't know the whole story yet. Take Lily, for instance, her best friend since they were little. Lily was all freckles and giggles, the kind of kid who'd share her lunch without a second thought. They'd sit together at recess, drawing in the dirt with sticks, whispering about silly things like what they'd do if they found a treasure chest. Lily didn't push, didn't pry, but she noticed stuff. The way Sophie flinched when someone moved too fast, the way she'd tug her sleeves down even on hot days. Lily didn't say much, but her eyes said she knew something wasn't right. Then there was Mr. Grayson, the new art teacher at Willow Creek Elementary. He showed up at the start of the school year with his messy hair and paint-splattered jeans. A guy who seemed more like a big kid than a grown-up. He had this knack for spotting the quiet ones, the kids who didn't raise their hands. Sophie was one of them. She'd sit at the back of his class, doodling in the margins of her notebook little sketches of trees, birds, anything to keep her mind off home. One day, he stopped by her desk, peered at her drawings, and grinned like he'd found gold. "You've got a gift, kiddo," he told her, his voice warm and steady. "Don't hide it." That was the thing about Mr. Grayson. He didn't just see Sophie's pictures. He saw her. The way she'd shrink into herself when the bell rang, like she didn't want to leave the safety of that room. The way her smile never quite reached her eyes. He didn't know about Clara, not yet, but he felt it something off, something heavy hanging over her. He started encouraging her more, slipping her extra pencils, asking her to stay after class to work on bigger projects. For Sophie, those moments were a lifeline, a tiny crack of light in a world that felt so dark. Lily saw it too, in her own way. One afternoon, they were sprawled out under a tree in Lily's backyard, the summer heat pressing down on them. Sophie's sleeve slipped up, just for a second, and Lily caught a glimpse of purplish mark curling around her wrist. She didn't gasp or make a fuss. She just looked at Sophie, her brows knitting together, and asked, "Does it hurt?" Sophie yanked her sleeve back down, mumbled something about falling off her bike. Lily didn't buy it, but she didn't push. She just scooted closer, handed Sophie half her popsicle, and kept talking about nothing. That was Lily's quiet support, waiting for Sophie to be ready. Back at home, though, the walls kept closing in. Clara's temper was like a storm. You never knew when it hit, but you could feel it building. Some nights, she'd pace the kitchen, muttering about money, about how hard she worked, about how Sophie didn't appreciate it. Other nights, she'd sit in silence, staring at Sophie like she was sizing her up. Those were the worst, the quiet ones, because Sophie could never tell what was coming next. A slap? A lecture? Or just that icy glare that made her feel smaller than she already was. The bruises weren't the only thing Sophie hid. She hid the fear, the shame, the gnawing sense that this wasn't normal. She'd lie awake at night, listening to the creak of the house, wondering if other kids lived like this, wondering if she'd ever be brave enough to tell someone. She didn't know it yet, but that bravery was growing inside her, slowly, steadily, like a seed pushing through dirt. And soon, it'd break the surface in a way nobody in Willow Creek could ignore. So here's the picture, Clara Hensley, the town's golden girl, hiding a monster behind her smile. Sophie, the little shadow at her side, carrying secrets too big for her small shoulders. And two people, Lily and Mr. Grayson, starting to see through the cracks. What happens when a kid like that finds her voice? What happens when the perfect life everyone believes in starts to crumble? That's where we're headed next. Buckle up, because this story is about to take a turn you won't forget. Let's set the scene. It's a crisp morning in Willow Creek, the kind where the air feels sharp in your lungs and the leaves crunch underfoot. The town's buzzing, but not with its usual chatter about harvest festivals or who's got the best pumpkin patch. No, today, all eyes are on the courthouse, a squat brick building that usually sits quiet, handling nothing more exciting than parking disputes. But not this time. This time, Clara Hensley's in the hot seat, and nobody in Willow Creek can look away. For weeks, whispers had been swirling through the town like a bad wind. Clara perfect, saintly Clara caught up in something messy. Word got out that the children's charity she'd poured her heart into, or so everyone thought, had some serious holes in its books. Thousands of dollars missing. Checks cashed that didn't add up. Donations meant for kids' winter coats and school supplies vanishing into thin air. The rumors were ugly, but most folks couldn't believe it. Not Clara. Not their Clara. The courtroom's packed when the day finally comes. You can barely squeeze through the doors, neighbors elbow to elbow, craning their necks to get a look. There's old Miss S. Carter from the bakery, still in her apron, muttering about how she always knew something was off. There's the hardware store guy, fidgeting with his cap, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. And up front, in her usual crisp blouse, sits Clara Hensley, cool as ever. Her hands are folded neatly in her lap, her face calm like she's waiting for a church sermon. Not a trial that could tear her life apart. The accusations are heavy. Prosecutor Bennett's on the case. A sharp-eyed guy with a voice that cuts through the room like a knife. He's got stacks of papers, bank records, forged signatures, evidence that Clara didn't just dip her toes into the charity's funds. She'd been swimming in them. He lays it out step by step. How she'd write checks to fake vendors. How she'd pocket cash meant for kids' lunches. How she'd build her golden reputation on a pile of lies. The crowd shifts uncomfortably. Some shake their heads. Others just stare, waiting for Clara to explain it away. She tries. Oh, she tries. When it's her turn, she stands up, smooths her skirt, and starts talking. Her voice is steady, soft like she's soothing a fussy baby. She says, it's all a misunderstanding, a clerical error. She'd never hurt the kids, never take what wasn't hers. She's been working tirelessly for Willow Creek. She insists, sacrificing her time, her energy, all for the community. It's a performance, and a good one. You can see some folks in the back nodding, wanting to believe her. After all, this is Clara. They're Clara, but there's someone else in that room who knows better. Someone small, sitting off to the side, her hands twisting in her lap. Sophie. She's there because she has to be Clara's daughter, dragged along to watch this whole circus unfold. She's got on a faded blue dress, her hair pulled back tight, and those big eyes of hers are darting around, taking it all in. She looks nervous, sure, but there's something else there, too, something brewing under the surface. Something nobody expects from a kid her age. The trial's dragging on, hours ticking by. Bennett's piling up evidence. Clara's lawyer, Pierce, is firing back with objections and excuses. The judge, Walsh, a stern guy with a face like weathered wood, keeps things moving, banging his gavel when the crowd gets too loud. It's intense, but it's starting to feel predictable. Clara's holding her own, spinning her story, and it seems like she might just wriggle out of this mess. That is, until the air shifts, until Sophie moves. It happens fast, so fast you'd miss it if you blinked. 1 minute she's sitting there, silent as a shadow. The next, she's on her feet, her little frame trembling but her chin lifted high. The room doesn't notice at first Clara's mid-sentence, talking about some donation she supposedly made, but then Sophie's voice cuts through, small but clear as a bell. She's lying. That's all it takes. 2 words, and the whole place freezes. Heads whip around, eyes widen. Clara stops dead, her mouth half open. She's lying, Sophie says again, louder this time, her voice shaking but pushing forward. She's not who you think she is. She's not good. She's not telling the truth. It's like a thunderclap in that quiet courtroom. The words hang there, heavy, impossible to ignore. A 10-year-old girl, barely tall enough to see over the bench, just called her mother a liar in front of half the town. And she's not done. The silence breaks into chaos. People gasp, lean forward, whisper to each other in a frantic buzz. Someone in the back lets out a choked laugh, like they can't believe what's happening. Clara's face goes white, pure, stark white, like the blood's drained right out of her. She turns to Sophie, her eyes flashing with something raw, anger, maybe, or fear. She hisses something under her breath, too low to catch, but Sophie doesn't flinch. Not this time. Judge Walsh slams his gavel down, the sound cracking through the noise like a gunshot. Order, he barks, his voice deep and commanding. The room quiets, but only just. Everyone's still reeling, waiting to see what happens next. He leans forward, peering at Sophie over his glasses, his bushy brows knitting together. Young lady, he says, slow and deliberate, you'd better explain yourself. This is a courtroom, not a playground. What do you mean she's lying? Prosecutor Bennett's on his feet now, his sharp eyes locking onto Sophie like she's the key to everything. He doesn't say a word, not yet, but you can tell his mind's racing, piecing things together. This wasn't part of the plan, but he's ready to run with it. Across the aisle, Clara's lawyer, Pierce, jumps up, his tie flapping as he waves his arms. "Objection, Your Honor," he sputters. This is absurd. She's a child. She doesn't know what she's saying." But Walsh waves him off, his gaze still fixed on Sophie. She takes a breath, small, shaky, but determined, and steps forward. The crowd's holding its breath now, every rustle of fabric, every creak of a chair amplified in the stillness. "I know she's lying," she says, her voice steadier this time, "because I've seen it. I've seen what she does. Not just the money, not just the charity, everything." And there it is, the first crack in Clara's perfect little world, splitting wide open for everyone to see. Clara's staring at her, her mask slipping, her hands clenching into fists. You can almost feel the panic rolling off her, years of secrets, years of control, all teetering on the edge because of this one tiny girl. The crowd's buzzing again, louder now, a wave of shock rippling through the room. "Miss S." Carter's muttering about how she knew it all along. The hardware guy's shaking his head, stunned. And Sophie? She's standing there, small but unbowed, like she's just lit a match in a room full of dynamite. What did she mean? Everything. What had she seen? What was Clara hiding that went beyond stolen cash? The questions hang thick in the air, unanswered for now, but the trial's just taken a turn nobody saw coming. Judge Walsh leans back, his face unreadable, but you can tell he's hooked. Bennett's practically vibrating with anticipation. Pierce is scrambling, flipping through papers, like he can find a way to shut this down. And Clara looks like she's one breath away from unraveling. This wasn't just a trial anymore. This was a reckoning. And Sophie, that quiet little girl from Maple Lane, had just turned it into something unforgettable. What happens next? Oh, you're not going to want to miss it. We're heading straight into the fire now. Secrets, lies, and a box in an attic that's about to blow this whole thing wide open. The courtroom's still buzzing from Sophie's bombshell, that small voice echoing off the walls like it's carved itself into the wood. Clara's frozen, her perfect mask cracking, while the crowd's whispering, shifting, waiting for whatever comes next. Judge Walsh's gavel might have brought order, but it couldn't stop the chaos brewing in everyone's heads. What did Sophie mean by everything? What had she seen? The air's thick with questions, and she's about to answer them in a way that'll flip Willow Creek upside down. She's standing there, tiny but steady, her hands clenched at her sides. Prosecutor Bennett's watching her like a hawk, his sharp mind already spinning, ready to pounce on whatever she's got. Judge Walsh leans forward, his stern face softening just a touch, and says it again, calm but firm. He wants her to explain. He wants details. And Sophie? She takes a deep breath, like she's pulling courage up from somewhere deep, and starts talking. "It was in the attic," she begins, her voice small but cutting through the hush. "A box. An old one, with dust all over it. I wasn't supposed to be up there, but I went anyway. You can almost see it, the creaky stairs, the dim light filtering through a cracked window, the smell of mildew and forgotten things. She'd been poking around one afternoon, restless, maybe looking for a distraction from Clara's latest outburst. That's when she found it, tucked behind a stack of moldy books, a beat-up cardboard box, taped shut like it was hiding something big. She pauses, and the room's so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone's picturing that attic now. That moment when Sophie's little hands pried open the tape. "I didn't know what it was at first," she goes on. "Just a bunch of papers. Old checks, receipts, stuff I didn't understand. But then I kept looking." Her voice wavers, but she pushes through. The checks, they had names on them that didn't make sense. Companies I'd never heard of. And the money, it was from the charity, the one she always talked about. The crowd stirs, a ripple of shock spreading through the benches. Clara's head snaps up, her eyes narrowing. But she doesn't move, not yet. Sophie's words are spilling out faster now, like she's been holding them in too long. There were bank papers too, Numbers that didn't match what she told people. She'd say she was buying things for the kids' coats, books, but the money wasn't going there. It was going somewhere else. To her, it's a gut punch, plain and simple. The saint of Willow Creek, caught red-handed by her own kid. But that's not the half of it. Sophie's hands tremble as she reaches the real kicker, the one nobody's ready for. Then I found something else, she says, her voice dropping low, almost a whisper. A paper at the bottom. It was old, yellow, with handwriting I didn't know. It was a birth certificate. My birth certificate. She stops, swallows hard, and the room leans in closer. It had my name on it, Sophie, but not hers. Not Clara's. There was another name. A woman I'd never heard of. A gasp ripples through the courtroom, sharp and sudden. Clara's face goes from white to gray, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it's the only thing keeping her upright. Sophie keeps going, her voice shaking but unstoppable. It said, my mom was someone else, not Clara. Someone named Rachel Evans. And there was no father listed, just her. I didn't know what it meant at first, but I knew it wasn't right. She'd always said she was my mom. Always. But she wasn't. The place erupts, whispers turning into murmurs. Murmurs turning into a full-on hum of disbelief. Judge Walsh bangs his gavel again, harder this time, his voice booming over the chaos. Quiet down, all of you. But it's no use, the shock's too big, too raw. A 10-year-old just said, Clara Hensley isn't her real mother. That perfect family everyone envied? A lie. And Sophie's got the proof, pulled straight from a dusty attic box. Bennett's on his feet now, moving fast. He's got that glint in his eye, the kind that says he's about to turn this trial into something bigger. Your Honor, he says, his voice smooth but urgent. If what she's saying is true, we need to see those documents. We need to investigate this now. He's already thinking ahead, connecting dots, fake checks, stolen money, and now a forged family. Clara's lawyer, Pierce, leaps up, his face red, stammering about how this is irrelevant, how Sophie's just confused. But Walsh isn't having it. He nods at Bennett, sharp and decisive. Get on it, he says. I want answers. The wheels are turning fast. Bennett's team scrambles someone sent to Sophie's house, to that attic, to dig up that box. But he's not stopping there. That name, Rachel Evans. It's ringing a bell somewhere in his head, and he's not letting it go. He starts digging, calling in favors, pulling records. And while the courtroom's still reeling, he's already got a lead. Rachel Evans, a woman from out of town, someone with a past tied to Willow Creek, someone who might just hold the key to this whole mess. Meanwhile, there's another voice waiting to weigh in. Up in the witness stand steps, Eleanor, a wiry woman with gray streaks in her hair and a no-nonsense look on her face. She's one of Clara's old charity buddies, someone who'd worked side by side with her for years. The crowd quiets as she adjusts the microphone, her hands steady, but her eyes hard. I didn't want to believe it either, she starts, her voice rough around the edges. Clara was good at what she did, too good. But I saw things. Checks she'd sign when she thought no one was looking. Cash disappearing after fundraisers. I asked her once, and she laughed it off, said I was imagining things. But I wasn't. Eleanor's words hit like a hammer. She's not some random outsider. She's one of Clara's own. Turning on her in front of everyone. She'd talk about helping kids, but half the time, the supplies never showed up. Eleanor goes on. I'd see her with new clothes, a new car, while we were scraping by to keep the charity afloat. I kept quiet too long, thought it wasn't my place. But hearing that girl, she nods at Sophie, her face softening. I can't stay quiet anymore. Clara's sinking now. You can see it. Her shoulders slump. Her hands twitch. She's losing control. And fast. The crowd's turning. Two folks who'd cheered her at picnics are glaring now, piecing it together. The money was one thing. But this? A fake mom? A stolen life? It's too much. Sophie's still standing there, her big eyes locked on the floor, like she's not sure what she's just unleashed. But she has no idea this is just the beginning. Bennett's got his lead on Rachel Evans locked in a name, an address, a story waiting to surface. Eleanor's testimonies sealed Clara's fate on the money front. And that box? It's on its way, every scrap of paper about to be laid bare. The trial's not just about charity funds anymore. It's about a little girl who cracked open a lie bigger than anyone imagined. What's next? Oh, it's only getting wilder. Stick around, we're diving deeper. And the twists aren't done yet. The courtroom's a powder keg now, ready to blow. Sophie's words about that attic box, fake checks, stolen money, and a birth certificate that doesn't list Clara have left everyone reeling. Willow Creek's golden girl is crumbling, her lies peeling away layer by layer. The crowd's buzzing. Judge Walsh is scribbling notes, and Prosecutor Bennett's already got people chasing down that Rachel Evans lead. But nobody's ready for what's about to walk through those double doors. Nobody. It's late in the day now, the light slanting through the high windows, casting long shadows across the room. The air's heavy, thick with tension, and the faint smell of polished wood. Clara's sitting there, her face a mask of strain, her fingers digging into the table like she's holding on for dear life. Sophie's off to the side, her small frame hunched, staring at her shoes like they might tell her what to feel. The trial's already spiraled beyond money, beyond anything anyone expected, and it's about to take its wildest turn yet. The doors creak open, slow and deliberate, and every head turns. A woman steps in, thin, wiry, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She's got on a faded coat, the kind that's seen too many winters, and her hands are twisting together like she's nervous. Her eyes big, hazel, just like Sophie's, dart around the room, taking it all in. There's a murmur from the crowd, a ripple of curiosity. Who is she? Why is she here? Bennett straightens up, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. This is her, Rachel Evans. She walks to the front, her steps hesitant but steady, like she's forcing herself forward. The bailiff guides her to the witness stand, and she sits, clutching the edge of the chair. Judge Walsh peers down at her, his voice gruff but curious. State your name for the record. Her reply comes soft, almost lost in the room's hum. Rachel Evans. And just like that, the pieces start falling into place. Pieces Sophie didn't even know she'd set in motion. Bennett takes the lead, his tone sharp but gentle, like he's handling something fragile. Can you tell us who you are? What you're doing here? Rachel nods, swallows hard, and starts talking. Her voice is shaky at first, but it grows stronger as she goes. I was Sophie's mother, her real mother. I had her 10 years ago, back when I was living just outside Willow Creek. The crowd leans in, hanging on every word, as she paints a picture of a life long buried. She was young then, barely 20, scraping by in a run-down trailer, with a leaky roof and a job that didn't pay enough. I didn't have much, she says, her eyes glistening. No family to lean on, no money, nothing. When Sophie came along, I swear I tried. But I couldn't feed her right, couldn't keep her warm. I was drowning. Her voice cracks, and a quiet sob escapes, echoing in the stillness. I thought she'd be better off without me, so I gave her up. Left her at a church, with a note, just her name and a prayer. Someone would take her in. The room's dead quiet now, every breath held tight. Sophie's head lifts, her wide eyes locking onto Rachel for the first time. There's something there, shock, maybe, or recognition, like a piece of her she didn't know was missing just clicked into place. Rachel keeps going, wiping at her face with a trembling hand. I never stopped thinking about her. Every day, I wondered where she was, if she was happy. I moved away, tried to start over, but it never left me, the guilt, the hope. Then I heard about this trial, about a girl named Sophie, and I had to know. Clara's staring straight ahead now, her jaw tight, her hands clenched so hard her knuckles are white. She's not saying a word, but you can feel the storm brewing inside her. Bennett's not letting this moment slip. He's got a hunch, and he's running with it. We've got that birth certificate Sophie found, he says, holding up the yellowed paper for the room to see. It lists Rachel Evans as the mother. No father, and no Clara Hensley anywhere on it. But we needed proof, solid proof. So we ran a DNA test, expedited, just this morning. He pauses, letting the weight settle, then drops the bomb. It's a match. Rachel Evans is Sophie's biological mother. 100% confirmed. The courtroom explodes, gasps, shouts, a wave of noise crashing over everything. Judge Walsh bangs his gavel. But it's like trying to stop a tidal wave with a spoon. People are on their feet, craning to see Rachel, to see Sophie, to see Clara's reaction. It's chaos, pure and raw, and at the center of it all is a little girl who just found out her whole life's been a lie. Clara's lawyer, Pierce, jumps up, his voice shrill. This is outrageous. This doesn't change the case, it's irrelevant. But Bennett fires back, calm and cutting. It changes everything. Its motive, its context, it's a pattern of deception. Walsh cuts them off, his gavel slamming again, and turns to Clara, his eyes like steel. Miss S. Hensley, you've got some explaining to do. Is this true? Did you know she wasn't yours? Clara's cornered now, no way out. She stands, slow and stiff, her voice flat but brittle. I took her in, she says, like it's a defense. She was left abandoned. I gave her a home, a life. I didn't think it mattered, telling her. She was mine in every way that counted. But there's no warmth in it. No regret, just a cold, hollow excuse. The crowd's not buying it. You can hear the shift, disbelief turning to disgust, whispers turning to mutters of betrayal. Sophie's still staring at Rachel, her face a mess of feelings, confusion, hurt, maybe a spark of something else. Curiosity? Hope? She spent her whole life with Clara, under that roof, under those rules, thinking that was her world. And now, there's this woman, this stranger, with eyes like hers, saying she's the one who brought her into it. It's too much, too fast. Her hands twist in her lap, her breath hitching like she's trying not to cry. She doesn't know what to feel, love for the mom who raised her, even with the pain, or a pull toward this new face, promising something different. Rachel's looking back at her, tears streaming now, quiet but steady. I didn't come here to take her, she says, her voice breaking again. I just wanted her to know I never stopped loving her, even when I let her go. It's raw, it's real, and it cuts through the room like a knife. Even the hardest hearts in that crowd miss S. Carter, the hardware guy they're softening, caught up in this collision of past and present. Judge Walsh leans back, rubbing his temple like this trial's aged him a decade in a day. A mother and daughter straight out of a feel-good movie. Bennett's nodding, already planning his next move. Pierce is floundering, flipping through notes with no answer in sight. Clara's sinking into her chair, the weight of her lies pulling her down. And Sophie's stuck in the middle, a little girl with two mothers, one she's known and one she's just met, torn between a past she can't escape and a future she can't yet see. The room's still humming with shock, the clerk's pen scratching furiously to keep up. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about blood, about truth, about a life rewritten in a single afternoon. What's Sophie thinking? What's Clara hiding? And where does Rachel fit into this tangled mess? We're not done yet, not by a long shot. The storm's just getting started, and the next twist is right around the corner. The courtroom's a whirlwind now, the air crackling with the fallout of Rachel Evans' arrival. Sophie's DNA match with her real mom has flipped everything. Clara's not just a thief, she's a pretender. And the whole town's watching her empire of lies collapse. The benches are packed, the whispers a constant hum, and Judge Walsh's gavel sits heavy in his hand, like even he's not sure how to rein this chaos in. But it's not over, not yet. The trial's about to shift gears, and what comes next is a fight nobody saw coming. It's late afternoon, the sunlight fading into a dull glow through the windows. Clara's slumped in her chair, her once perfect posture gone, her face a mix of defiance and defeat. Rachel's off to the side, her eyes red but steady, still locked on Sophie like she's afraid to look away. And Sophie, She's the still point in this storm, sitting there with her hands twisted tight, her big hazel eyes darting between the two women who've shaped her life. The money, the lies, that's one thing. But who gets to call her daughter? That's something else entirely. Prosecutor Bennett's the first to pivot. He stands, adjusts his tie, and turns to Walsh with that calm, cutting voice of his. Your Honor, given the revelations, Clara's deception, Rachel's claim, we're not just dealing with theft anymore. There's a child involved, a child whose future's at stake. We need to address custody. The word lands like a stone in the room, custody. It's not just a legal term now, it's a battle line, and everyone feels it. Clara's lawyer, Pierce, shoots up, his voice sharp and flustered. This is a criminal case, not a family court. Custody's got no place here. But Bennett's ready, firing back smooth as silk. It's got every place here. Clara's built her defense on being Sophie's mother, a mother who's lied, stolen, and hidden the truth. That's relevant. Rachel's her biological parent, confirmed. We can't ignore this. The crowd's murmuring again, heads nodding, some shaking, Willow Creek splitting right down the middle. Walsh rubs his temple, his weathered face creasing deeper. He's been at this job a long time, seen plenty, but this is a tangle. All right, he says, slow and gravelly. We'll hear it. Ms. S. Hensley, Miss Evans, step up. Let's sort this out. The room shifts, chairs scraping, as Clara and Rachel move forward. Two women, two claims, and one little girl caught between them. You can feel the weight pressing down every eye on them, every breath held tight. Clara goes first, standing stiff, her voice clipped but loud enough to carry. I raised her, she says, her chin lifting like she's daring anyone to argue. 10 years I've been her mother, fed her, clothed her, gave her a home. I didn't know about Rachel, not at first. I took her in when she was left, and I made her mine. I'm not perfect, but I'm what she knows. She pauses, glancing at Sophie, and for a second, there's something softer there, regret maybe. I won't fight it, she adds, quieter. If she doesn't want me, I won't make her stay. The crowd stirs, surprise, disbelief. Clara backing down? That's not the woman they know. But then her eyes harden, and she straightens up. Wait, no. I've changed my mind. She's my daughter. I've earned that. I won't let her go without a say. It's a flip so fast, it gives you whiplash. And the room's buzzing again, some folks muttering about her nerve, others wondering if she means it. Clara's fighting now, claws out, and it's clear she's not ready to lose everything. Rachel steps up next, her hands shaking but her voice steady. I'm not here to force anything, she says, soft but clear. I let her go once because I thought it was right, thought she'd have a better life. I didn't know it'd be like this. Her eyes flick to Clara, then back to Sophie. And there's an ache there, deep and raw. I just want to know her, to be part of her life, if she'll let me. I've missed 10 years, I don't want to miss more. But it's her choice, not mine. It's humble, it's honest, and it hits the room like a quiet thunderclap. The crowd split, some leaning toward Clara's fierce claim, others melting at Rachel's gentle plea. But there's one voice that matters more than any of them, and Judge Walsh knows it. He turns to Sophie, his stern face softening just a touch. Come here, young lady, he says, beckoning her forward. She hesitates, her sneakers scuffing the floor, but she walks up, standing small and trembling in front of that big bench. The room goes dead silent, every whisper, every rustle gone. Sophie, Walsh says, his voice low but kind, this is a lot, I know, but we need to hear from you. You've got two women here, Clara, who's raised you, and Rachel, who's your blood. Where do you want to be? Who do you want to stay with? It's a question no kid should have to answer, but Sophie's got no choice. Her breath hitches, her eyes darting between Clara and Rachel, and when she speaks, her voice is shaky, barely above a whisper. I don't know, she starts, her hands twisting tighter. Clara's been my mom forever. She's hard, sometimes really hard. She's hurt me, yelled at me, made me feel like nothing. But she's all I've had. I don't hate her, not all the way. She pauses, swallowing hard, and glances at Rachel. And Rachel, she's new. I don't know her, but she looks at me like I matter. Like she's sorry. I want to know her too, maybe. But I just want to feel safe. I want to stop being scared all the time. It's raw, messy, and heartbreaking, a little girl, spilling her soul in front of strangers. The crowd's tearing up. Now Miss S. Carter's dabbing her eyes. The hardware guy's looking down like he can't handle it. Clara's face twitches. A flicker of something guilt, maybe, crossing her features. Rachel's crying quietly, her hand pressed to her mouth, like Sophie's words are breaking her all over again. The room's thick with feeling, and Walsh just sits there, taking it in, his pen still for once. He leans back, exhales long and slow, and rubs his face. This isn't simple, he mutters, more to himself than anyone else. We've got a child here who's been through hell, needs stability, needs time. Clara, you're facing charges. Your home's not an option right now. Rachel, you're her mother, but you're a stranger to her. Neither of you's ready, not yet. The crowd's hanging on his every word, waiting for the hammer to drop. I'm making a temporary call, he says finally, his voice firm. Sophie's going to Miss S. Harper, Lily's mother, for now. She's been looking after her during this mess, knows her, trusts her. It's a safe place while we figure this out. A murmur runs through the room, some nods, some grumbles, but it lands soft. Miss S. Harper's a familiar face, warm and steady. And Lily's Sophie's rock. It's not perfect, but it's something. Clara's jaw tightens, but she doesn't argue, not this time. Rachel nods, a small, grateful smile breaking through her tears. Sophie looks up, her eyes wide, like she's not sure what to feel, relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. The crowd's buzzing low, debates sparking about who's right, who's wrong, what's fair. But Walsh bangs his gavel, cutting through it all. That's it for now, he says. We'll revisit this. Sophie's what matters here, not your egos. The room's still humming as people shuffle, voices rising in quiet arguments. Sophie's led away, her small hand slipping into Miss S. Harper's, a lifeline in the storm. Clara's staring after her, something unreadable in her eyes. Rachel's watching too, hope and hurt tangled up together. This fight's not over, not by a long shot. Where does Sophie go from here? What's she feeling? We're not done digging yet. Stay with us, because the end's still up in the air. Here we are, at the end of the road, or at least this stretch of it. Willow Creek's quieter now, the courtroom drama fading into memory. But what happened there? It's not something you shake off easy. Sophie's story started in shadows, secrets tucked in an attic, lies woven into the fabric of a small town, and it's ending in light. Not blinding, not perfect, but the kind of light that creeps in slow, steady, and stays. Let's take a step back, breathe it in, and see what it all means. Think about where we began. A little girl, just 10 years old, living under Clara Hensley's roof, a roof that hid more than it sheltered. Bruises under sleeves, a mother who wasn't a mother, a life built on stolen money and stolen trust. Clara was the town's golden girl, smiling at fundraisers, handing out balloons until Sophie cracked it open. That attic box, checks, papers, a birth certificate, turned everything upside down, pulling Rachel Evans out of the past and into the present. It was messy, it was raw, and it was real. The trial was a wildfire spreading fast, burning through Willow Creek's illusions. Clara's theft from the children's charity came to light, her perfect mask slipping with every forged signature. Then came the DNA, the truth about Rachel, the fight over who Sophie belonged to. She stood in that courtroom, small but fierce, and told the world what she'd seen, what she'd lived. She's lying, she said, and those two words lit the match. Judge Walsh, Bennett, Pierce, they all scrambled to keep up. But Sophie? She was the center, the spark that wouldn't fade. And where did it land? Clara stepped back, finally letting go of a fight she couldn't win, maybe shouldn't have started. Rachel stepped in, slow and careful. building something new with Sophie cookie crumbs and quiet laughs by the river. Mrs. Harper's house became a haven, Lily's friendship a lifeline. Mr. Grayson's art room, a place to breathe. Sophie's not the same girl. She was not the shadow, not the silence. She's sketching birds now, laughing with Lily, finding pieces of herself she didn't know were there. It's not a fairy tale, it's better. It's hers. So what's the takeaway? Peel back the layers, and you've got something big. This is about truth, how it hides, how it fights, how it breaks free. Sophie found it in that attic, carried it to that stand, and handed it to the world. It's about courage. Too, a kid facing down a giant, not with fists, but with words, with heart. She didn't just survive Clara's world. She tore it apart and built something new from the rubble. And family? It's not just blood or a name on a paper. It's what keeps you safe, what lifts you up. Whether it's Rachel's hope, or Lily's giggles, or Miss S. Harper's warm kitchen. But it's not all tied up neat, is it? Life's not like that. And neither's this story. Clara's out there, facing her charges, maybe facing herself for the first time. Those visits with Sophie, they're fragile, a thread that could snap or strengthen, depending on what comes next. Rachel's in Sophie's life now, but 10 years lost don't vanish overnight. There's work there, trust to grow. Sophie's healing, sure, but she's still a kid with a past that'll linger, bruises fade. But memories? They stick around. Here's something to chew on. Forgiveness. Sophie's got Clara in one hand, the woman who raised her, hurt her, shaped her, and Rachel in the other. A mom she's just starting to know. She's mending things with Clara, bit by bit, those drawings, those quiet talks, but is it enough? Could it ever be? What do you think? Can she forgive Clara completely? Let it all go? Wipe the slate clean? Or is it always going to be there? A shadow she learns to live with? It's a big question, and there's no easy answer. That's where you come in. This story is not just mine to tell, it's yours to wrestle with too. What hit you hardest? Sophie's stand in that courtroom? Rachel's tears? Clara's surrender? Maybe it's the way Sophie's picking up her pencil now, drawing a future she couldn't see before. Whatever it is, let's talk about it. Drop your thoughts below. Tell me what you think about forgiveness, about family, about Sophie's next step. I want to hear it all, every guess, every feeling, every wild idea. And if this tale's got you hooked, if you're still reeling from the twists, the heart, the hope, then stick around. This is Trial Tales, where we dig into the cases that shake you up and stay with you. We've got more coming, more secrets, more courage, more stories that'll keep you up at night. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, join the crew. You don't want to miss what's next, trust me, it's gonna be wild. So let's close this chapter, not with a goodbye, but with a see you soon. Sophie's out there, sketching under Willow Creek's big sky, finding her way. Clara's facing her reckoning. Rachel's holding on to hope. And us? We're here, piecing it together, learning from it, talking about it. Thanks for riding this one out with me. It's been a hell of a journey. Now, tell me, what's Sophie's story mean to you? Let's keep this going. See you in the comments. And on the next Trial Tales.